Over the years, we have seen some pretty crazy XRP price predictions of, $1,000, $5,000, $10,000. And, well, let's just be honest, we've seen some that are just outrageous of 30 to 50,000 to 100,000 plus dollars for XRP. Now, most of these are just ridiculous, let's just be honest, but some of them are actually very realistic. Like, for an example, I pulled a few thumbnails just off of Google that are talking about XRP to $50, XRP to $100, $100 confirmed. Like, some of these, are a little bit clickbaitish, but that's exactly how YouTube works. I've talked to you guys about this. I've addressed it many times. But for the most part, when we think about, a $50 XRP or even $100, for XRP, those are prices that people still think that are just absurd or ridiculous. But when we actually think about what's going on behind crypto and the tech behind this space, it's clear that TradFi, the institutional players, the global financial elite, they are embracing this technology. In fact, they're actually building with it. They're tapping into it. They're integrating it. And this is what's actually causing, these price predictions of like $50 to $100 for XRP to actually become a reality. Now let's actually talk about that. Let's actually first address the price of XRP right now. Now I'm recording this a little bit ahead of time, but right now we're at about $2.60. We might sell off a little bit more before we do go a little bit higher, but the main thing here is that we're at $2.60, but the market cap of XRP is 152.4 billion, fully diluted value $260 billion. Now, a lot of people have a problem with XRP hitting like $1 trillion in value, let alone the value that it would need to hit $50 or even $100. See, this is where I kind of get confused because we know that the market cap of Bitcoin has hit over $2 trillion already. So if we're thinking about XRP sitting at about roughly, $260 billion fully diluted, to get to 2.6 trillion, that's a 10x from here. That's about a $26 XRP. Now, if we're going for almost $5 trillion, then we're at almost $50 for XRP. Again, when we're thinking about this, okay, that doesn't seem too ridiculous because, again, it's just hovering around a $5 trillion market cap and the price of XRP would be over $50. The reason why I say that, and I try to put it into perspective, it doesn't sound crazy to me. To a lot of people, they think, well, that's over a $5 trillion market cap. Absolutely no way that happens. But think about the markets that we are targeting right now. Cross-border payments, hundreds of trillions of dollars. The FX market, $7.5 trillion per day. Derivatives, over $600 trillion. We're talking about absurd amounts of money out there that this technology is actually targeting and even being integrated within. The DTCC just released a DLT connector platform that has XRP included, and this is a company moving $3 quadrillion per year. Did I repeat? Let me just repeat myself real quick. $3 quadrillion per year. That's why I try to say that $5 trillion for tech is not that ridiculous, especially when the tech is as efficient as the XRP ledger. We know that right now, Ripple is integrating RLUSD within Ripple payments. They announced this back in the beginning of April. This is very interesting because number one, we already know how big the Ripple network actually is. Major institutional players tapped in already. Cross-border payments, because this is where we start to see RLUSD being integrated within, the cross-border payments market, targeting the cross-border payment market through a lot of the institutional players that Ripple already has tapped in. And a lot of people think, well, this is beneficial for RLUSD, right? Well, we know that Ripple does plan on launching additional stablecoins, that USD stablecoins are not going to be the only thing out there. And if we're thinking about RLUSD and all of these additional stablecoins becoming a reality, all of a sudden you start to see the value of XRP shining. What is that value? Being a neutral bridge currency between all of these additional fiat-based stablecoins. But cross-border payments is the focus here. And when we're thinking about that, right, we look at what the World Bank recently mentioned. This goes back to April. Big shout out to Subjective Views for this. We have the World Bank needs a fast, cost-effective bridge currency for cross-border payments, liquidity provision, and interoperability between CBDC, stablecoins, and other digital assets. It would complement these assets by enabling seamless conversions. Any ideas? Now, again, we think about XRP here because number one, XRP is a neutral bridge currency. Okay. Number two, XRP used to be tapped in with on-demand liquidity, which got renamed to Ripple Payments because it provided on-demand liquidity. So here we have the liquidity provision already being, fixed. Fast transaction times, cost-effective bridge currency usage because XRP is a bridge currency, and interoperability. It can easily transact between any two assets, right? XRP is a perfect neutral bridge currency. So that's why we're thinking XRP here, but check it out.
I think, so from our perspective, of course, we are looking at digital payments as a means to an end.
Yeah.
So the end we are looking for is financial inclusion and the development outcomes. And for that, we don't see CBDC as a panacea.
Yeah.
A lot of people kind of attribute magical powers to CBDC.
Yeah.
We don't subscribe to that. And of course, whether it is a good fit for a country depends on the context, no? But largely from a developing country perspective, what we need is well-functioning digital payment systems. And we don't see any reason why fast payments cannot provide that. And also general modernization of the digital payment system. But whether it is competition, I think one has to really see how all of this plays out. I think one needs to see there's perhaps a space for all, and it might be different use cases or different contexts. But focusing from our perspective on the development needs in developing economies, we feel the first order of business is to have a well-functioning fast payment system. But of course, keeping in mind all the new developments which are happening, how do you future-proof your investment to prepare for that future? No, it is very possible that the fast payment systems might need to be the rails on which other forms of money might need to be transacted.
Right.
So I think it is important to keep that in mind, and also in terms of the different features in terms of the access to central bank money.
Yeah.
How does that work? I think all of that will have to be kept in mind.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, when we are thinking about these conversations from these big organizations like the World Bank, we immediately think, well, is there any connections back to XRP? Well, yeah, because if we actually go back to this document released from the World Bank, right, it includes under stablecoins for cross-border payments, they included Ripple and XRP. Now, again, the wording here is a little bit weird because they're calling XRP a stablecoin in this case. I think today, this document is actually more important now than ever before because of the fact that Ripple now has an official stablecoin tied to them, RLUSD. All right. That could be the stablecoin for cross-border payments. XRP could easily be that bridge currency between RLUSD and any other stablecoin of value from a fiat currency basis, which we already know that XRP, in terms of the actual ledger, will have a Euro stablecoin tied to it from USV, and also a Brazilian real stablecoin tied to it as well from Brasa Bank. Ripple has plans to launch a digital yen. They have plans to launch a digital pound as well. So when we're thinking about all of these additional stablecoins, XRP's bridge currency, that neutral bridge currency use case, becomes even more bullish. And again, the fact that the World Bank is preparing for this, and this goes back to November of 2021, by the way. I know that we're coming up on 4 years, but the fact that the World Bank still spotlighted XRP and Ripple should tell you everything that you need to know about how prominent the name Ripple and XRP actually is around TradFi as well. But when we're thinking about this, we also know back in October of 2023, the World Bank became the first issuer of Euroclear's new digital securities platform, with DLT tapped in heavily around this. Again, the world is moving on-chain and on DLT and blockchain, and that's why we're looking at XRP and Ripple becoming extremely valuable. Not to mention the fact that, like, when we think about traditional stocks, right? For an example, this is a great post from Subjective Views as well, because it's highlighting Microsoft having a market cap of 3.24 trillion, And he's saying that if XRP captures even 2% of the $156 trillion cross-border payments market, that's 3.12 trillion in transaction value. The market cap of XRP at Microsoft's current market cap would be almost $56. Okay, now this is not going off of the fully diluted value. This is not going off the full supply of XRP, but still, it shows us how valuable XRP could be if it just captures small percentages of some of these markets. And this is why I'm looking at what the World Bank is talking about here and why they're talking about cross-border payments, specifically how we can make cross-border payments efficient at the same exact time that I'm looking at the BIS. Because the BIS has been fully focused on cross-border payments for so long. This is a post from the 8th, actually, of the month, which was speculation or transaction. Cross-border crypto flows involving more than 180 countries from 2017 to mid-2024 peaked at $800 billion per quarter in late 2021. Crypto defies geographic barriers, can aid remittances, but may challenge capital controls. Now, what's crazy about this, right, is that we go over here to this post from the BIS, or this document from the BIS, which is the Committee on Payments and Market Infrastructure. This is the Cross-Border Payments Interoperability and Extension Task Force. Look at who's on this list. Number one, it's spearheaded by the ECB, the European Central Bank. Then we also have some very large players, and of course, Ripple right there. Why is Ripple at the center of almost every single one of these organizations? All of these big discussions ongoing around major initiatives for cross-border payments or any significant revolution, right? And what I mean by revolution, I mean, we look at some of these trials that these big banks have been pushing with DLT and blockchain for years. Ripple was always there. We go back to the original Ripple Swell, the first one. It was a banking conference held by a blockchain-based company. You know, this is not coincidental. Like, this is why we look at the connections between Ripple and all of these organizations, all of these big groups. This CPMI group is probably one of the biggest ones to actually focus on because they continue to work on tokenization, CBDCs. Back in May of 2024, for an example, their work program included tokenization and CBDCs. Today, you know, tokenization is becoming one of the biggest things around TradFi, not just crypto, but TradFi. And also, the CPMI group that Ripple is a part of is also outlining next steps to promote adoption of ISO 20022. This is through the CPMI group. As you guys can see down here, this announcement should provide clarity to industry regarding the medium-term governance and maintenance of the harmonized data requirements during the period of global transition to the ISO 20022 messaging standard, the BIS CPMI said in a Tuesday press release. These steps also provide impetus to industry-led efforts to develop ISO 20022 market practice guidelines for cross-border fast payments. Like, this is all focused on faster cross-border payments. And it's crazy because Ripple has been focused on cross-border payments for well over now a decade. And also, big shout to Smoke Dog for this. Here we have how ISO 20022 is forcing banks to modernize with DLT. Many banks are struggling to keep up with the rapid changes in the payments landscape due to outdated legacy systems. These systems, often over 20 years old and lacking proper documentation, create significant challenges for banks. As Walter explains, legacy is always an issue if you are a large company. Despite the difficulties, there are still voices within banks claiming, "My system is working well. There's no need to change it now." However, initiatives like ISO 20022 are pushing banks to confront the reality of their outdated infrastructures. Banks must choose: continue to patch these old systems or upgrade to modern infrastructure capable of handling the demands of today's financial ecosystem. The arrival of ISO 20022, along with the shift to real-time transactions and DLT, is not a coincidence. This is a coordinated shift into a fully digital financial system. For the first time, DLT is enabling real-time value transfer with ISO 20022 messaging, making it possible to move value efficiently and transparently across networks. This shift is becoming a necessity for banks to remain competitive. Banks cannot continue relying on outdated systems. They must modernize and adopt DLT to meet the demands of ISO 20022 and stay compliant with evolving regulations. For investors, this shift presents a unique opportunity. The future of financial services will be built on platforms that embrace ISO 20022 and DLT, creating a more efficient, transparent, and connected global payments network. And here you actually have that fully documented as well. This is from Wells Fargo, as well as other prominent names. I want you guys to understand that we are witnessing a big shift towards DLT and blockchain for cross-border payments. That's why Ripple is a part of these major group discussions, because Ripple is a company that's well experienced utilizing DLT and blockchain. And it's also the fact that Ripple is highlighted by all of these organizations as well for being a very efficient blockchain-based company. This is also the reason why when we think about what's happening here, yeah, $50 or even $100 for XRP is not out of the question. It's extremely possible. And I actually could see this becoming a reality in, the coming years. What's the time frame on this? I have no idea. I could not tell you, what I think a time frame is, because we have yet to actually see things kick into overdrive. But I do think that we're getting very close, considering the fact that we are witnessing regulations hitting this space. The big players are planning around this. Institutional players are tapped in with the SEC now. I don't think that we have to wait that long to see how valuable utility actually is for these projects like XRP. And I think that that's going to surprise a lot of people and actually shock a lot of people too, once we start to see, trillions moving through some of these networks, because that's what's going to affect the value of the underlying asset, the gas token, in this case, XRP. And I think that's going to surprise a lot of people in terms of what value that actually has once we see utilization at scale. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, to notifications on, because more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. And with that being said, guys, it's been Nick. Thanks for watching. Peace out.